AS Guy, hour number 2 of OverDrive on a Friday, getaway Friday, if you will. Jim Tatti, Dave Feschuk with you. Steve Phillips will join us very shortly. I just want to sort of argue with myself. We talk about that 9-game run starting tonight in Colorado, ending Sunday, September 10th against KC. But then, I mean, there's 4 games at home to Texas, and then the final 15 are in their own division. I mean, there really is no spot picking here. They've got to play over 600 ball from here to the end.
Yeah, like 661.
Yeah.
They want to get to that 91 wins or 90, what it's going to take. I mean, right now, Texas is in the final wildcard spot. They're on pace to get 91 wins. So the Jays are going to have to win, their share. And good thing is they've done it the last couple of years. They've had some great Septembers, 2022 and 2021. The thing about it right now, though, Jim, is they just haven't really had the spark that you would want on the offensive side of the ball. But maybe going to the high altitude of Colorado, where the Rockies have had the worst ERA in all of baseball at home. They've allowed more runs than anybody in baseball at home. Maybe that'll be the thing. A little altitude at the Mile High City will get this season going in the right direction as September begins.
And yet, the soft-throwing Ryu takes the mound tonight.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's always an answer to that, right?
There is.
You could say the Jays have to do this, but what about the other team?
But it's not the pitching you're worried about, right? Like, maybe the Rockies have get after it with Ryu, but the Blue Jays should have enough offense to overcome that, right? Like,
they should.
They should, and the offense shouldn't be the issue here, and yet it has been too often. But if they're going to be the team that Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins told us they were, and many of us believe they were at the outset of the season, they're going to have to get hot at some point, and why not now?
Yeah, it's just, I find it really intriguing because unless the bottom falls out and this thing just goes way, way south, this should go right down to the end. And I know, as I said earlier, there's not a lot of judgment here. It could just go into the books as the year it didn't work out, if in fact it doesn't.
Well, there's judgment in that. The big question for me will be, who is Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? If he continues on the way he's continuing on, he continues on through September the way he's played the opening 5 months of the season, is this guy a superstar or just another guy? Because right now he's playing like just another guy.
Or just a guy who's going to have a great career that had a bit of a stumble. And that's all of them do that. So the sample size isn't large enough either way to know.
Well, most of the analytics guys will tell you, no, he's the real deal. He's hitting the ball hard. A lot of this has been bad luck. He just hasn't got the bounces. There is exit velocity that looks great. There's all kinds of reasons to believe he's a next-level talent. Problem is he hasn't had next-level production, and that's what they need in the month of September.
We need some expert analysis. Joining us down the Maple Toyota hotline is Steve Phillips. Steve, welcome in. How are you today, sir?
Well, great, Jim. Good to be with you.
Our pleasure to have you. So we're doing the Vladdy debate just because if things don't go well, somebody's going to play the blame game. In terms of his season, if it continues on the way it is, how do you analyze that? Where do you put that?
Well, I look at it and say he's a 24-year-old who is still figuring it out. And he's had some peaks, and the league's made some adjustments to him, and he's sort of caught in between, and he's trying to live up to expectations. And then I start to think about, other players who, sort of went through the same thing. You look at Bryce Harper. On either side of Bryce Harper's MVP season, his first MVP season, he was a near league average player. He wasn't, he was having years like Vladdy's having this year, and Bryce Harper is now still one of the best players in the game. It's just, we're dealing with a 24-year-old who's is having a slower time making adjustments, but I don't think it speaks to anything about what he'll be in the long run. I don't. I think he's still going to fulfill the potential. He's still in his career. He's a 131 OPS plus, which there are guys in the Hall of Fame with that sort of OPS plus. And yes, this year he's only 14% better than average. Still not just a guy, but he's disappointing us because he taught us to expect more. He taught us to believe there was more in the tank. And so, and I still believe there is, and I still believe that it's going to happen this year. And at some point it's going to really turn on. He's going to get into that Julio Rodriguez hot streak that we saw from the Seattle Mariners. And so, it's just, it's been underwhelming a bit. And they need him desperately right now without Bichette in the lineup, without Chapman in the lineup. They need the best Vladdy they've had all season long. They may or may not get that yet. But I think at some point it will kick in. And if they're in October, maybe it kicks in then and he starts to carry them. But, I think we forget that he's still just 24 years old.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt about it, Steve. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons to believe that there's a lot better days ahead for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I guess the question is, are some of those days going to be in September of 2023? If you look at this team, though, Steve, there's an encouraging recent track record. When you look at last season and the season before, the Jays have gone a combined 37-19, played .661 baseball these past 2 Septembers. They've almost like flipped a switch a little bit in both those years where the stretch run's been very, very strong for them. If you are, in that, clubhouse today, can you kind of take some solace from that and maybe say, hey, we're good finishers in this room and we can get it done now?
Well, if I'm John Schneider, I'm using it, right? Yeah. I'm selling it. I'm telling them, look, this is who we are. This is what we've done, because the game is so mental. And I don't know that it's hard to explain it in a way to really get people to understand, because you watch the physical competition on the field, and nobody really digs into what a player's thinking and feeling. We know when they're hot, we know when they're cold, but what's going on in their minds, and what can get a guy out of a slump, what can get a team out of a slump, what can put a guy in a slump. That's all part of this stuff that goes on between the ears, that is different for everybody. But the one similarity is even the very best, the voices of doubt are there and can creep in. Even for the best. And you think, well, geez, how is it possible that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. would ever have any self-doubt, because it happens, because there's so much failure in this game, right? Failure is inherent in the game. You fail 7 out of 10 times and we call you good in this, right? And what other part of the world do you fail 7 out of 10 times and you're good? Now, maybe in sales, you can, as long as you get the number of sales, it just comes down to quantity. But, this is one where, the other guys need to step up. Timing matters, right? When you get hot, and who you're playing matters, and the head-to-head matchups and all of that. And the shorter the window at the end of the season, the more important every game is, the more the timing matters, the more the matchup matters. And it's going to be interesting to see, because, here's a team that's got more home games to play, but they are going to play against the East. But right now they're playing against the weaker teams, and this is where they need to take advantage of it. But it's also when their roster's been the weakest on the season, without Bichette and without Chapman. And so, they've got their work cut out for them. They can absolutely do it. And especially with the pitching staff, they've got the best pitching in baseball. And I don't know if people really recognize that either. They're leading baseball, in ERA, and it's it's an outstanding pitching staff that generally keeps them in a game. The bullpen generally holds the lead or holds the deficit. And they need to get hot in every component of the game right now to try to make that big move forward.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with you, Steve, that the possibility is there. That individual struggle you were talking about, I think we also see it collectively. You'll see it with a base running error or a defensive error at the worst time. And suddenly, you when you watch that, you go, is this guy trying to compensate for another problem? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that there's a level of immaturity still with this team, because the Dodgers don't make these mistakes. And, they've got Jason Hayward, who looked like he was done last year, and now he's resurrected in there. David Peralta looked like he was done last year, and he's back. But these veteran guys, they don't make these silly mistakes that the Jays make sometimes. And, when Bichette, when I first noticed his knee was hurt, was when he broke to third base on a ground ball to shortstop, and he ran into an easy out. And I'm like, that's basic base running 101 that they teach in rookie ball. And they made some of those mistakes. And so, physical mistakes are going to happen. Mental mistakes can't happen, and that's a level of maturity. But being able to handle the moment, being able to handle the play in the moment, game on the line, that you want the ball hit to you, you're going to be able to make the play. Not everybody can do it. I think this team can get there, but I thought this was the year the maturity would kick in. And to me, they're still sort of growing in that way, but it can happen all at once, and they can get hot and it look like the best team in baseball. And they haven't looked like that team yet this year, which makes you feel like it's got to come at some point, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, Steve. I mean, is there like, when you walk into Coors Field, I mean, obviously the Rockies have given up more runs at home than any team in Major League Baseball. They have the worst ERA at home in Major League Baseball. It should be like batting practice, right? Like, is there sort of a danger there that if you start thinking it should be batting practice, that it might not be? Or how do you approach, facing a team that's been as weak as the Rockies are on their home field, which is a launching pad for big flies?
Yeah, the Rockies are so interesting, right? They generally, at the end of the year, they have the worst ERA at home, and they have the best offense at home. And you think, and then they have sometimes the worst offense on the road, and a better starting pitching on the road because of the altitude and the ballpark in that. And you can't go in there. Usually the guys who are most bothered are the pitchers because they feel like, well, geez, you know what? I don't think I can throw my breaking ball here because of the light air up at the high altitude. It's not going to be able to catch the air to break in the way that it might normally do aerodynamically. So maybe I shouldn't throw it. I generally want my guys to use the pitches that usually make them effective. But I think that sometimes getting a pitcher to go to if he's going to go to a secondary pitch, if it's a breaking ball, if he has the changeup, sometimes the changeup's the better option. From the hitter's perspective, you can get a little anxious, but once you take batting practice and you realize you mishit a ball and it goes over the wall, you're like, oh, wow, this is great. Like, and you don't worry too much about being perfect because, imperfection still can turn into the same result at that ballpark. And it's, nobody's really found the formula to win there, for the home team, for the Rockies. They just don't really know. But there's no reason why, with where the Rockies are now and where, the Blue Jays are, that the Blue Jays shouldn't be able to go in there and sweep a series.
Steve, let's put you in the driver's seat here. I mean, it's September 1st. You're in Colorado for 3, then in Oakland for 3, at home to KC for 3, at home to Texas for 4, and then 15 games against teams that you've struggled against in your own division. How do you approach this final 28 games?
Well, I think you take them one at a time, and you don't talk about winning at all because, that is putting the cart before the horse. My big thing was never talk about wins. Talk about, if you're going to talk about winning, win this pitch in this inning, in this game, and let it be the most important pitch of the season. And if you win that pitch, then get ready to win the next pitch. And if you win next pitch and the next pitch, then the end result of the game is there. But I think that, it's like in recovery where, people are in recovery for whatever addiction and they think, geez, if I can't do this for the rest of my life, I don't know if I'll be able to do it. And that's why they always say one day at a time. And it's really the same in baseball, one pitch at a time, right? Don't make it too big. Just make it about this pitch in this moment for the pitcher, for the catcher, for the fielders, for the hitters, for the base runners. Everything is one pitch at a time and win that pitch and move on. And so I think that that's really the primary focus. Now, macro view, you've got to take advantage of these games against the lesser teams. And yeah, they know that, but you can't talk about it. The front office knows it. The fans know it. And then you've got to hope you're in a position where you keep it close because if you start to play better baseball, you can beat the Yankees. You can beat the Red Sox. Those are teams you're going to play. You can beat the Orioles. You can beat the Rangers. But, you can't worry about those series until you get through these in front of you right now. And so, and it's tricky because your mind and you're in the clubhouse and the writers start asking, well, are you looking forward to that Rangers series? Are you looking forward to that series? How come you guys haven't beaten? And there's that a lot of times, there's a reason why you don't tell your kids don't spill your milk because you just created an image in their mind of them spilling their milk
right.
and they spill it. Right. And it's the same thing. And what players have to find a way to do is when writers say, well, how come you guys can't beat the American League East? What the image that gets in their head is, oh, yeah, we don't beat this team. They've beaten us before. Remember that game? They beat us this way and that way. You've got to find a way to protect yourself from going down that rabbit hole. And that's why this game, again, it's hard to explain the mental aspect of it, but I'm hoping that at least gives you some sense of that's the part that you really have to focus on is what are your players thinking about and focusing on and let them go out and play.
So if we're going to look ahead to the playoffs, Steve, which I know the players can't, Jeff Passan at ESPN reporting today that the pitch clock rules will remain the same in the postseason, which is 15 seconds with no runners on and 20 seconds with runners on base. The Players Association, Steve, as you know, had expressed a wish to give the players more time, give the pitchers more time in the playoffs. And Major League Baseball is saying, no, we like the way the games are paced as it is, and we want to keep it the same for the postseason. Where do you sit on this?
Yeah, I wouldn't change it at all. Not at all. I would leave it exactly as is. I want the postseason to be the same game that's played in the regular season. And it used to drive me crazy where part of it is all the off days you get in the postseason where you can really get through with 3 starters and 3 relievers and everybody else is there for the clunker. Because the off days, guys are rested, they get extra time, and it's different than the regular season. Where in the postseason, you can use a smaller nucleus of players to win. Where in the regular season, it takes a village. I kind of like the idea of that. Now, I also, the expanded rosters going from 26 to 28, and there's limits on that. I like that because it levels the playing field off for everybody. But I look at it, and I know everybody's upset, saying, "Well, geez, what happens if we have a pitch timer violation in the playoffs that costs somebody a game?" And I'm like, well, shame on that pitcher. I mean, you've had an entire season, and in the NFL, they don't change the amount of time you get to call a play. Games are more important. You got to make sure everybody understands. You get delay of game penalties all the time still in the NFL, even in the playoffs. And so I'm all on board with not changing it. And these are the new rules. Everybody abides by them. You know it going in, and shame on you if you're a hitter or a pitcher and you get busted on a pitch timer violation.
We talk a lot about the wild card, but clearly there's some great divisional races. The West is very intriguing. The Central, Cleveland with the Angels.
Cleveland thinks they're in it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, did they make the right waiver claims because they added arms?
I don't know. I mean, if I were them, I mean, I have looked at their offense this year, and I don't know if they've looked at the stats, but they're one of the lowest scoring teams, if not the lowest scoring team in baseball this year. And so, you look at it, where are they? They've scored 545 runs, and there are very few teams that have scored fewer. Oakland has scored fewer than them, and the Marlins are 534 runs. And so, there's like two teams that have scored fewer runs than they have this year. I would have thought that Hunter Renfroe and Harrison Bader might have been a good pick for them because their outfield's not productive, but they're going to go out there and pitch. I honestly don't get it. I mean, this is the amazing part, right? The Angels and the Guardians have exactly the same record, 64 and 70. So one team dumped their players and the other team grabbed them, and neither of them are really playoff teams. And so, I mean, but, I think this was egregious what the Angels did. I think that if I was hoping the commissioner might exercise the best interest of baseball clause, because I think this is wrong. It's a lot like Charlie Finley and what he did back in the day, selling players. And this affecting the playoff races where not everybody gets the same access to the player like they would at the trade deadline. At the deadline, you can compete for that. The idea that now you're going to let somebody give major impact players where one team could have claimed 5 guys. Right? I mean, here's the thing. Somebody could have claimed the 3 pitchers and the 2 outfielders, and the Marlins or somebody could have done that, and who knows what would have happened, right? Is that fair? And I always look at it this way. If you're in a fantasy baseball league and somebody pulled a stunt like this where it's end of the year, you're not really in it, and so what you do is you put all your players out there, and you might be trying to help a buddy, right, who's behind there. And again, that could be some collusion. You can't. There shouldn't be ability to be able to dramatically impact the playoffs. That owner or manager in a fantasy league would be kicked out of the league, and they would undo the moves. Everybody would be up in arms about it. We have a major league team that effectively did something that in a fantasy league you'd kick the owner out of the league. That's how bad it is.
No, it's bizarre. It's bizarre. No, speaking of you talking about how bad it is with the Angels, how good is it to be Ronald Acuna Jr., Steve? One of the great days in Major League history. He put up yesterday with gets married in the afternoon, I guess before the game. Hits a grand slam to become the first player with 30 home runs and 60 stolen bases in a season, and of course propels the Braves to an 8-7 win over the Dodgers in one of the games of the year in Major League Baseball. How good is it to be Acuna Jr. and the Braves right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, right? And yet, here's the thing. I think they went 21-7 in the month of August. The Dodgers lost the game yesterday. They ended up going 24-5 in the month.
Yeah.
I mean, and Mookie Betts hit 2 homers in the game yesterday. The National League MVP race is still up for grabs. Now, I right now would give it to Acuna because I think the stolen base differential, I believe that when you look at OPS, which is on base plus slugging percentage, I don't think that it captures everything about a player. So, for instance, for Acuna, he's a plus 50 in stolen bases this year, something close to that. That should be 50 more total bases that get calculated into his slugging percentage that would actually make his OPS greater than where Mookie Betts is right now.
Right.
And there's no numbers that take that into account. I'm actually working on that at MLB Network of a new statistic calling it base running OPS, where anytime a guy takes the extra base that others might not have, or he steals bases, that net total, you factor it into the slugging percentage. And I think he gives you a much better read. And I also think that Acuna gets the edge because he's so good in the first inning. Now, Betts is too, but not nearly as good as Acuna in the impact. And the Braves have dominated the first inning this year in such a way that I think it gives them a distinct advantage on the season. So I think that's going to be a great race. I mean, Betts is playing out of his mind. Freeman's playing out of his mind. Even Matt Olson is in the mix there from Atlanta. So, but Acuna is just an absolute stud of a player. I don't know if you know, when I was with the Mets, we had Acuna's father. We were a generation too early. We signed his dad out of Venezuela, and you know he was okay, but he wasn't like the two boys. Now Luis Angel Acuna, Ronald Acuna Jr.'s brother, was traded from Texas to the Mets in the Scherzer deal. He's one of their top prospects right now, and he's going to be a star. And so yeah, we were a generation early on that one. But here's the thing: Ronald Acuna Jr. does have two sons. I'm buying stock in those guys right now.
Right.
I've been guilty of that, Steve, from time to time, and I always say I was ahead of my time. I don't know if you can use that, but while we're on things that are developing, the Seattle Mariners are just unconscious. Does this continue?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think that they're going to settle down and come back down to earth a little bit. You know, one of the big challenges for them is Julio Rodriguez has a nerve issue in his foot. So he was carrying them for a bit. I think he had 28 hits in 10 games, which is absurd. And I mean, Mookie Betts had 50 hits in the month of August. You know, stuff that doesn't happen that way. But Rodriguez is hurt. Now the team's played well despite that. But Seattle at the end of the year plays 7 against Texas and 3 against Houston. The last 10 games of the season, that's who they're playing. 3 against Houston and 7 against Texas. And so that division, and very likely the wild card, is going to come down to that last series. And one of the advantages that the Blue Jays have is they're not playing those teams where they might beat each other up. And so the Jays could take advantage of beating other teams and propel themselves ahead of even all of them, if possible. But I think it's going to end up the Blue Jays get in and the Rangers are out. I think Houston will win the division. I think Seattle will be the top wild card team. And I do think, too, I think Tampa Bay is going to end up passing Baltimore in this final month of the season, too. There's going to be a lot of turnaround and change and jockeying for positions in the American League playoff race.
I mean, when you look at the race, I mean, is this validation of the extra wild card team, Steve? I mean, there's always that talk of expanding the playoffs diminishes the regular season. Certainly, the other sports are more guilty of that when you talk about basketball or hockey, where half the teams get in essentially. But are you still a fan of the extra wild card, or were you more of a purist that wanted to see it more exclusive?
No, I love it. I would have actually expanded it one more playoff team. Here's the thing: what we have a chance for. We have a chance for a potential 5-way tie for the second and third wildcard spots in the National League. We have potential, like Miami's 3 behind, Cincinnati 2, Arizona 1, and then you've got San Francisco in the third wildcard spot. The Cubs are 2 games up on them. It could end up that you could have a 5-way tie for the second and third wildcard spots. And think about how many teams. That only leaves out, I think, 6 teams in the National League that aren't even in the mix right now. And everybody still keeps thinking San Diego's going to make a run, which I think is absurd. But I think, you know, this year's playoff race, I understand we don't have the Mets and Yankees. I understand the Angels aren't in. The White Sox, you know, people look at the large markets and think it's important to have them, but we've got a chance to have an amazing playoff. The Phillies are such a fun team. The Dodgers and the Braves are unbelievable. You know, the Reds, if they get in, could be intriguing. The Cubs have surprised everybody. Milwaukee can beat Atlanta, Los Angeles, and Philadelphia with the starting pitching they have. So the National League's got a chance to be great. In the American League, I mean, Baltimore, Tampa, Houston, Seattle, Toronto, Texas could all be the team that represents the American League. I'm not believing in Minnesota in any way, but
right.
But I think everybody else you could close your eyes and absolutely dream that team makes a run to the World Series.
Wacky end. Steve, thanks very much. Enjoy your weekend.
You bet. Thanks for having me, guys.
Steve Phillips joined us in the Maple Toyota hotline. Build your next dream Toyota at Maple Toyota, and check out Maple Toyota's pre-owned inventory arriving daily. Guy, it's time to Toyota. Visit mapletoyota.com. The baseball stretch run is fantastic.
Yeah, I'm always against diluting the regular season, Jim, because I think it's ridiculous that half the teams get in these other sports, and sometimes you wonder why are we playing the 82. But I think Steve's right on this one. Like they seem to have hit, something close to the right amount here with that extra wild card spot in baseball because the races are just so good. There's very few teams are out of it, and there's a lot of markets that are in it that wouldn't have been otherwise.
So you like the NBA play-in too, right? I do.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
I do like it. I think it adds a little intrigue.
So the NHL is now on the clock.
Yeah, Bettman said it's not happening, but I mean, it seems like a bit of a no-brainer, right? You add a little more intrigue to a race, and then you add this, one and done or whatever you want to do, a 2 out of 3, or the NBA more complicated way of doing it. I mean, there's lots of ways you can do it, but I think it's great for the game, and certainly it's added, a lot of teams that wouldn't have been in the race to this race.
Coming up next, Yes Guy, No Guy. This is OverDrive on TSN 4, TSN 1050, and the iHeartRadio app. Oh, Yes Guy. OverDrive is brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. As we grind on in hour number 2, time now for this.
Yes Guy, No Guy.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, drivers and passengers, time now for the officially sanctioned edition of Yes Guy, No Guy on OverDrive. It doesn't happen often, just when a certain individual is on the premises.
Love it.
Here we go. Yes Guy, No Guy number 1. This is an ad lib. Yes Guy, No Guy.
Okay.
The Sabres limiting sales with zip codes is a smart thing to do.
I'm going to give it a yes guy.
Ooh.
I mean, we've seen this act before. This is not aimed at anybody but one group of people.
Yes.
Those people are Leaf fans. Okay? We know that. Okay, but here's the thing.
Canadian Leaf fans.
Canadian Leaf fans, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, are there Buffalo Leaf fans?
You never
There
know.
probably are a few. There are a few. And that's fair. Look, it's crazy to try it because we've seen the Ottawa Senators under Eugene Melnyk try to do this, and it's pretty hard to limit people from buying tickets if they want to buy tickets, but they're going to try. I'll tell you who this is a nod to. This is a nod to their own fans because a lot of their fans, they're well aware of the fact that a lot of their fans make a good buck selling their tickets, which they procure, as season ticket packages on the secondary market to those Leaf fans who have big pockets and will come down the QW and spend a boatload of money and still get in cheaper, far, far cheaper than they would at the Palace, than they would if they wanted to pay for the Palace on Bay Street. So this is like basically them saying to their fans, we're going to try and help you guys out and make more Leaf fans have to go to the secondary market, i.e. our own fans, to pocket, to get these tickets. Essentially, they are padding the pockets of their fan base by doing this.
Which would still be cheaper.
Right.
Than a Leafs home game.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
What do you think of it?
I think it's silly. I think money is money, and so you only want a certain brand of money. I don't understand that. I don't know that it ever works. I think it's a great headline, a nice little news piece, but it's just irrelevant to me. I mean, why do you care where your money comes from?
Well, I think
suddenly that's a concern.
I think they're just playing on their own fans' sentiments.
So that's a no guy.
Okay.
You
No
say
guy
yes
from you.
guy, I say no guy.
I'm a yes guy.
Okay. Yes guy, no guy. Miking the FIBA on-court officials is brilliant.
Oh, I'm a yes guy. It's
Yeah.
been fun. It's been fun listening to the back and forth between the coaches and the officials. And look, I mean, FIBA officials are FIBA officials. People that complain about the NBA refereeing. When you watch these games, you see some questionable stuff go on out there. But on the other hand, if you look at it from a human perspective, like they're trying their best. They're very transparent about the way they're officiating these games.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
I like this.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah, the review.
For sure.
Perfect.
And, it's like Canada, to me, like if Canada wanted to complain about the officiating today against Brazil, they didn't have much of an argument. They got a nice video review called late down the stretch there.
The shot that Olenek took.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I like it. And it was brilliant because there was that with about maybe $1.40 to go, the Brazilian head coach was concerned about something, and this is an absolute yes guy statement. The official turned to him and said, "I'm giving you the answer."
Right.
And then tooted the whistle, and away we go.
Exactly.
I mean, yes guy couldn't have done that any better. So that is a yes guy for me too. And quite frankly, you could say that, well, in the NBA it's going to be X-rated, but when people understand that it's in play, they'll clean it up, or maybe they get fined.
Without a doubt.
And that's always a missing component of all North American sports is what is said in those discussions along the sidelines or the interchange. It just helps you understand the game better.
It does, but unfortunately, they can't beep those conversations fast enough in North American sports.
That is right. Yes guy, no guy. If the Jays miss the playoffs, one of Schneider or Atkins is not with the club next season.
I'm a yes guy on this, and I'll tell you who it's going to be. It's going to be John Schneider.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, look, he's got a couple years left on his deal. He signed a 3-year deal, so it won't be cheap for the Blue Jays. And if you're thinking about maybe they don't want to spend money on another manager, maybe that'll be the mitigating factor. But I can't see Atkins, who's got a deal that runs through 2026.
I wouldn't put this on the general manager, would you?
He's put together the best pitching staff in all of baseball, as Steve Phillips just pointed out to us in that great segment. And look, they've got the potential to be a great hitting team. They just haven't hit. And I'm not sure how you blame management for the fact that a lot of your guys, including Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who's supposed to be your flagship offensive player, just hasn't had the kind of flagship offensive year that they expected out of him. That's not a management's problem.
Yeah, so that's a yes guy. One of them will not be with the Jays, and I would concur. It's not a sort of an indictment of Mr. Schneider, but again, if they don't win this year, again, there's a lot of things that didn't happen, and maybe a little more experience, like the guy who stands beside him in the dugout, might be the answer.
That's another good point.
Yeah, somebody who's actually done it and could say, "Look, guys, been there, done that. You don't do that, and you know better than that." And I'm not saying that Schneider doesn't say that, but maybe it just goes in one ear and out the other.
Well, to your point, there's been a lot of sloppy baseball, a lot of underwhelming baseball, and to have a guy named Donnie Baseball looking over your shoulder as the bench coach and Don Mattingly, I don't like your chances if you're John Schneider and this thing goes off the rails.
He's just done so much and so well that it's hard to ignore that.
And he's got management experience.
Yeah. Yes guy, no guy. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander wins an NBA MVP at some point during his career.
I'm a no guy just because of how hard it is to win one of those things.
Yeah.
Like, this is a first-team NBA point guard, so he'll be in that conversation if he's on a team that is a competitive team with championship aspirations. He will get into that conversation. It's just a very hard thing to do. So if I was betting, I'd say no guy, but it's not impossible.
No, it's not impossible. I'm going to say no guy with all due respect because he's a really fine ball player and we're all proud of him. But that is a coveted and very rare achievement in the NBA, and there's a crowd. So I just don't know that he can cut through that.
It's going to be tough.
Takes nothing away from his ability, so I agree with you there. Yes guy, no guy, and this is, again, off the cuff. Yes guy, no guy. With the word that Tyler Bertuzzi was considering a longer term with the Leafs, settle for one, there's a real danger that somebody on the Leafs roster could actually grab the Nylander money, and his name is not Nylander.
Yeah, yes guy, for sure. No doubt about it. I mean, look, that's a possibility. I mean, let's see Tyler Bertuzzi arrive at camp healthy and play some games for the Maple Leafs before we start anointing him as a long-term Leaf. Because this guy, if he's got an Achilles heel, it's been the inability to stay in the lineup at times. But when he's been in lineups, he's been very effective. So, but you're right. Like, it's a possibility. I don't like everything we know about the Nylander negotiations. And we don't know much, but it's that they're pretty far apart. They have been far apart. And there's no end in sight to that standoff. So you're right. Maybe somebody will get that money eventually. It won't be William Nylander because they're going to have to trade William Nylander, and it could be Tyler Bertuzzi. Yeah,
and so I'm going to go yes guy as well. And we all understand, like I've said this many times, Nylander should be in no hurry because his market is actually set next summer. And people are doing this summer's comparables. Well, that's, he's got a year to play with that. But as he does that, the Leafs could then look at, well, we've got this amount of money here. And if it doesn't bias him, what does it bias?
Right.
And it'll be something or somebody.
Right. Hey, man, look, and Tyler Bertuzzi brings something they haven't had. And you've been talking about this more than anybody, like a power forward presence, right?
Yeah, and he was the guy I mentioned.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Sure. So we'll see. Like, he gives them something they don't have. And if there's been one criticism of the Maple Leafs that's been on the button year after year after year, it's that they got too many of the same type of player.
Wow, we're agreeing. So yes guy is winning over no guy. Yes guy, no guy. One of the Ottawa Senators or the Buffalo Sabres reaches the playoffs this year.
Heavy yes guy on this, and I think it's going to be the Sabres. I really do. I just think when you've got these two stud defensemen in Dahlin and Owen Power, if they get anything out of their goaltending, because they got some decent firepower up front, I think they're a playoff team. I think they're a scary team because I like how they're built. They're built from the back end out in terms of two guys who have all the potential to be in the Norris Trophy conversation. Dahlin's already been in it.
Yeah.
And I think Owen Power has a chance to become a Norris Trophy type of defenseman. If you've got two of those guys for the next 10 years,
at least.
Yeah, they're going to be in their conversation for the next 10 years. But next year, I think it could happen as long as the goaltending isn't a complete liability as it has been. And that is an if.
Yeah, there are holes on both those rosters, but I got to believe I'm going to answer and affirm yes guy to one of Ottawa or Buffalo as well. We got to start disagreeing, and this may be it. Giannis signs another deal with the Bucks.
I'm a no guy on this.
Oh, gee.
I mean, he signaled more than once. Recently, I think in an interview with the New York Times recently, he talked about how he's got to make sure everybody's all in before he re-signs with them when his contract's up next summer. This isn't the first time he signaled that he may not be a lifer in Milwaukee. And certainly there have been a lot of people around the NBA, including people connected to the Raptors, who've been of the belief that he wanted out of there or would be out of there long before now. So it's hard to imagine him staying there forever, because who would stay forever in Milwaukee? And I just don't think he will.
I'm going to disagree. I'm going to go no guy, or a yes guy. You said no guy. I'm going to go yes guy, just because if you're in that business and you let that kind of a player walk out the door, you are in the wrong business.
Well, that's true.
They've got money at their disposal. There's no reason for that to happen unless somebody's asleep at the wheel.
You're right. They're going to have to, but they're going to have a lot of convincing to do here right now, because it hasn't been going in the right direction for the Bucks since they won the championship a couple of years back, and Giannis has not been happy with the way they've rounded out the roster around him, and so until they can convince him that there is a championship caliber roster around him, and I don't think he's convinced just yet, I think there's a chance he walks.
That's going to be intriguing, and we'll of course rekindle the Giannis to Raptors rumors yet again.
Yes, well, for sure. I mean,
but the question is, are the Raptors going to be in that kind of position where he's going to want to come here?
Well, that's the question.
Yeah.
I mean, Masai Ujiri has obviously been one of the many NBA executives who's coveted Giannis. That's not tampering. That's just the facts. Pretty much every executive would covet a player of that caliber. But certainly the Raptors were in a position a couple of years back where they were very transparently leaving room for the possibility that Giannis would be available in free agency. He ended up signing with the Bucks. But there's also the new free agents in the NBA, Jim. Even if he does sign with the Bucks, the idea that he might not stay with the Bucks in a league where players ask out all the time and star players under contract for multiple years, nothing's in stone anymore in this.
No, there's no guarantee except for the money. Yes guy, no guy. The Argos are 8-1. The Ticats are 4-6. That's the Labor Day Classic. Chad Kelly extended for 3 years, and things are going really well for the Double Blue going into that game. The question is, the Argos reach the Grey Cup this year.
Oh, big yes guy.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'm a yes guy. Now, I know you're going to set up a nice Labor Day karmic event where the Argos will assign their big money, high-profile quarterback to this big contract extension and then get absolutely throttled by the Ticats on Labor Day. That's what you're thinking, right?
I'm hearing the play-by-play now. The Ticat defense is stealth.
Okay. But I just think, look, you like, this guy is no joke. Chad Kelly is the real deal.
Well, so are the Argos. Come on, that's a complimentary football, all units working well. And yet, it's only Labor Day. So even if they were 9-1, my CFL theory is I really don't care what your record is at Labor Day. Tell me what happens the last 3 games of the regular season and how you go into the playoffs, because the Argos are pretty good at that. They've got Grey Cups wins with 9-9 records. They can do that.
So you're going a no guy on the they have peaked too early theory.
I'm going to go no guy. They do not reach the Grey Cup based on what we're saying right now, based on where they are right now. They got to keep this thing going. And, so does Winnipeg.
They've been too good too soon, is what you're saying.
History tells us that's a common thought. So,
okay.
So I'm going to say no guy. Yes guy, no guy. Phil Kessel plays at least one more season in the National Hockey League.
Oh, yes guy. Phil will never retire, no. Right? Phil will find a way to get on a roster, and he's made it known now that he's okay with allowing his Ironman streak to lapse if indeed he can find a team that'll take him this year. He doesn't need to play every game. He's not worried about that. He wants to contribute to a team, loves being around the locker room, playing ping pong, sharing stories, and that makes sense. I mean, hey, this guy is an incredible athletic specimen who has defied all laws of conditioning and strength coaching. Why would he go away just yet?
Not a big fan of the sports science department, but still very effective.
Yes, indeed.
So I'm going to agree. Yes, guy. And that concludes Yes Guy, No Guy for this particular segment of OverDrive. Mailed it in Friday, brought to you by Boston Pizza, the best place for any family meal. Plus, for the month of September, kids eat free with a minimum purchase when you dine in. So grab the kids, hustle into your local BP tonight. This is OverDrive on TSN 4, TSN 1050, and the iHeartRadio app. The final segment of the second hour of Overdrive on a Mail It In Friday. Mail It In Friday is brought to you by Boston Pizza, the best place for any family meal. Plus, for the month of September, kids eat free with the minimum purchase when you dine in. So grab the kids and hustle to your local BP tonight. This is exciting stuff. I have in my hand right here the broadcast schedule for radio, which is what I do, for the Leafs and Raptors for TSN 1050 in Toronto.
All right.
This is an exciting moment for me. Every late August, I get this sent to me, and now I know what my life will track like until the middle of April.
You got to carry that big hunk of paper around, or you got this in a digital form?
I have it this way. I have it on two calendars and in the phone, but this is the one I use at the rink. And
all right.
For both teams, for both the Raptors and the Leafs. So it's exciting.
It's that time of year. This is like, it's the Friday of Labor Day weekend, kind of like the New Year's Eve of the sports schedule, kind of like it feels like once you're into September, the NFL is coming and training camps in the NBA and NHL are coming, right? And baseball is getting exciting because you're in a playoff race for the Blue Jays.
And we've got wall-to-wall TV coverage this weekend and all of next week, certainly of the U.S. Open. All those TSN channels. It's marvelous coverage. Mark Rowe will join us at the top of the hour. Milt Stiegel, who has the day off, can you believe it? Will phone in and chat with us about the wild weekend and this is, I call this transition weekend for the CFL, because this is when things start to change. You know, all those NFL cuts. So if you've got a couple of holes in your roster, there are opportunities there. And
you, as a big Ticats backer, are saying that.
Just a minute now. Just a minute. I've done them both.
Okay.
Ticats and Argos.
Well, you're a Hamilton guy. Don't try and hide where you're based.
But I've worked in Toronto for 40 years.
Fair enough. Okay.
So, and I make the joke that I have a sweater from each team, and every time I try to cut it down the middle and sew it together, the sewing machine blows up.
Okay.
It will not accept that kind of a union.
Because you're living in Hamilton, or the Hamilton area, the greater Hamilton
I'm in
area.
Burlington.
Okay, Burlington, Hamilton.
Whatever, yeah.
It's all the same to us from Toronto.
So. That's west.
Yeah, west. The point.
I like how you said that.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
My point would be, you're saying that there's going to be a transition. You're basically saying the Ticats are going to catch.
No,
the Argos unaware.
I'm saying is that after this weekend, if you can go on a nice run, you can negate somebody who went on a nice run before this weekend.
Because 9-1 doesn't mean much beyond Labor Day. Like the start.
9-1 is great. Let's not put that down. They're 8-1 right now, but 9-1 is fantastic. Right. And what's Winnipeg 9-2? Those are great accomplishments. But the relevant stuff happens from here on in.
Fair enough.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, and that's what the Blue Jays are hoping too, right? The Blue
Jays
right.
There you go.
Blue Jays have had some great Septembers. These last two Septembers, they played 661 baseball. They got to play 661 baseball between now and the last game of the season, October 1st, if they want to get into that playoff, right? So
that's an excellent point. Do we cry about the first 134 games of the Jays, or do we look forward to the final 28?
Exactly. No, you got to hate the first 134 don't matter much if the final 28 are masterpieces or largely masterpieces, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I said. But.
Yeah. Well, okay, fair enough. But then, no, look, I mean, my thing with this is, though, I know they've had good Septembers in 2022 and 2021. I just, I don't see the makings of it.
Well, you'd like to be Seattle, wouldn't you? Yeah. I mean, last year, come on, Seattle in the wild card round against the Jays, the play-in, and Seattle this year. I mean, that's kind of what you had the Jays doing.
Right.
But it didn't happen.
Right. Now, look, I mean, stranger things have happened. They do it. I don't doubt the pitching for a minute. I think they've got the pitching to do it. We'll find out if they've got the bats that will come alive at the appropriate moments.
Yeah, and all we're really talking about is people that are reaching their capabilities, because we know they're capable. They just haven't done it.
They're capable, but they just haven't done it. Yes.
Which is kind of a weird bit of analysis, but it's true.
Which is why someone's got to get fired if this thing doesn't pan out the way the Blue Jays hope it will, because it's hard to explain. It's hard to explain why they haven't done it.
Did you say the same thing for Montoyo?
Yeah, I guess you did.
Yeah, it's just not happening.
It's not happening.
Everything looks good, but it's just not happening.
Well, and Steve Phillips brought it up. Is it immaturity? Because he's talking about how the Dodgers don't make the mistakes the Blue Jays make on the base pass. They don't make the mistakes the Blue Jays make in the field at times, and they don't make the mistakes in terms of lack of quality at bats in big moments, i.e. with runners in scoring position. I don't know how much immaturity can get you off the hook if you're John Schneider.
Coming up next, Mark Rowe and Milt Stiegel. We're going over to TSN 2. We'll continue on TSN 1050 and, of course, OverDrive always on the iHeartRadio app.